Hello, and welcome to episode 22 of Celestro's Star Wars Legion painting series. In this episode, we're going to paint the Clan Wren expansion from Fantasy Flight Games' Star Wars Legion. The main focus of this video will be on the two named characters in the unit, Ursa and Tristan Wren, where I've stuck to the established yellow and grey designs. For the remaining Mandalorians, I've had some fun exploring a range of alternative schemes, loosely taking inspiration from the wider Star Wars universe. Let's take a look at the painting stages. After assembly, I'll be priming the figures black, followed with some grey and white zenithal highlights applied from above as usual. Focusing just on Tristan and Ursa, I'll then be providing the base colours, followed with a controlled amount of shading. I'll then be spending most of the time drawing on the armour designs and providing some highlights before finishing things off with some scenic basing. We'll then take a quick look at some of the alternative colour schemes I played around with, to hopefully give you some options and ideas as to how you might like to paint yours. Let's begin. Assembly of the figures is pretty simple. For Tristan, I chose to hold the arms in place with white tack to begin with, so I can more easily access the chest area later, where I'll be painting on the armour design. I'm now priming the base and the figures before gluing on the flight stands. And as usual, I'm applying some grey and white zenithal highlights from above, although a plain prime in grey or white would also be okay. I'm now gluing the flight stands to the bases, and the small socket pieces to the undersides of the jetpacks. I've chosen to go ahead and glue the Mandalorians down, fitting the ball at the end of the flight stand into the socket beneath the jetpack. You could of course paint the flying figures off base and glue them on later if you like. I'm also now applying some brown earth basing paste by Vallejo, although this too could be done later on if you wish. We're now ready to begin painting. For the dark grey sections of the suit, including the gloves, I'm using a roughly equal mix of Scalecolor's Eclipse Grey and Graphene Grey, although pretty much any dark grey tone would be okay here. For the lighter sections on the arms, I'm using an equal mix of Graphene Grey and Graphite. For the armour, I'm using a mix of the slightly less matte Mechanicus Standard Grey and Celestra Grey. I'm also using this for places like the canisters on the belt, as well as the weapons, the back of Ursa's helmet, and the jetpacks. I'm also painting most of Tristan's helmet with this. I'm now placing some rough highlights using more of the Celestra Grey. These don't need to be especially refined, as we'll be painting the yellow design on top in a while. I'm also using some flat black to paint the visors. For the areas of brown leather, I'm using Walnut mixed with a little Graphene Grey, as I'm after a somewhat desaturated look. Steel Legion Drab mixed with some grey would also work well here. As usual, I like to tidy things up as I go along. For the yellow areas, I'm using Sahara Yellow, desaturated slightly with a little graphite. For Ursa's helmet, I've chosen to paint it mostly in yellow, then paint the grey detailing on top in a while. With the base colours complete, I'm now going to add some depth to some of the recesses with some shades. I'm starting with a 2:1 mix of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil, which I'm using for the areas of brown leather. Next I'm going to slightly thin down some Nuln Oil with a little Larmian medium. And I'm using this to shade the jetpack, along with the weapons, and any other parts of the outfit where we might want to add some definition, such as the joins in the armour. We're now ready to add the highlights and finishing touches. I'm now returning to the Sahara Yellow and Grey mix, and I'm going to begin drawing the designs on the armour. You can see now why I decided to leave Tristan's arms off whilst doing this. For the design on the helmet, I might first place a couple of small dots to help guide my hand when drawing on the stripes. I'm now moving on to Ursa's chest armour. With the designs in place, I'm now going to lighten the tone with the addition of a mix of Sol Yellow and Tenere Yellow. And I'm now simply working over the markings to brighten things up to my liking. I'm also providing some general highlights to Ursa's helmet before adding the markings on top in grey. These shoulder pads have a dark band running round the edge, so I'm brightening the centre accordingly. I'm now using increasing amounts of the Tenere Yellow and Sol Yellow to place some brighter highlights. For my brightest highlights, I'm now mixing in some Ivory. I'm going to paint the grey design on Ursa's helmet using a varying mix of Mechanicus Standard Grey and Celestra Grey. I'm now gluing on Tristan's arms. With the designs complete, we can now go ahead and provide some highlights to the rest of the figures. I'm starting with the dark grey suit, where I'm adding some graphite to the base tone in a couple of stages. For the lighter grey on the arms, I'm lightening the base tone with the addition of some Mojave White. Where I'm going to be spending most of the time, however, is on the grey armour, where I'm first going to highlight up to pure Celestra Grey, and then to Ivory. So I'm first highlighting up to Celestra Grey from the Mechanicus Standard Grey and Celestra Grey base tone. I'm going to be adding some quite sharp highlights to create the impression of a more metallic surface. I'm also highlighting the weapons and the jetpacks as I go. After hitting pure Celestra Grey, I'm now adding increasing amounts of Ivory to create some more glinting highlights. This is now pure Ivory. I'm also adding a few scratches using tones from both ends of the gradient. I'm now painting the yellow trim on the hanging pieces of armour. And here I'm just boosting the highlights on the neighbouring sections. Next I'm using a simple grayscale to add a glinting highlight to the visor. Moving on to the brown leather, I'm going to provide my initial highlights using Walnut. For these flatter areas, I might work with the paint more thinly to create a gentle gradient towards the lower half. I'm now adding some Tenere Yellow for the brighter highlights. With the highlights pretty much complete, I'm now using some pure black to add some black lining, which I find really helps with the definition and separation of the parts. I've now noticed that Tristan has a blue right shoulder pad, so I'm painting it with a couple of layers of Tesla blue over a white base coat. And I'm going to approximate the design on the shoulder pad, firstly with some Mars orange. And now some yellow. And here I'm just highlighting the blue with the addition of some white. I'm now hitting the small row of lights on the forearm with some white, and then providing some colour with some red and a pale blue-green. With the painting complete, I'm now providing some basing as described in the earlier episodes. That means I'll be providing some green shade, followed with some grit and some fine turf by Jarvis to match the terrain I'll be playing on. I'm also gluing down some fine leaf foliage by Woodland Scenics, mainly for the bases with the flight stands. And I'm also filling things out with some clump foliage along with some tufts of grass. This completes Ursa and Tristan, and you could of course paint the rest of the figures in the same way if you like. Let's take a quick look at some alternative schemes. I decided to have some fun with the remaining members of the Mandalorian resistance, freely trying out various colour schemes and techniques. For the Beskar Duelist, I simply took inspiration from the illustration on the upgrade card. For the blue areas, I started with a mix of deep blue and Cantabric blue for the base tone, then highlighted up through Caspian blue and Adriatic blue. For the red cape, I started with some deep red mixed with black, then highlighted with some Antares Red and a little fuchsia. And for the metallics, I just used a mix of dark sea blue and black, highlighted up with some white and some ivory for the brightest highlights. You can see I went for a slightly rough and stippled look here, and I also glazed on some of the neighbouring blues and reds. For the purple armour of this Mandalorian, I used a base tone of violet mixed with petroleum grey, then highlighted up to pure violet before adding a little white and some fuchsia. And for the pale yellow markings, I used a mix of Tenere Yellow with a little spring green and some white. You can see I've also added plenty of battle damage using some grey tones. When painting multiple figures, I might take a few shortcuts by using some Black Templar contrast paint for the weapons and jetpacks. For the dark suit on this Mandalorian, I used black leather, followed with a few gentle highlights with the addition of some Tenere Yellow. And for the armour, I used a Caspian blue and black base tone, highlighted up to pure Caspian blue, then to Bearing blue, and I added some white sands for the brightest highlights. I also had a play with some specular glints of light, mainly for the helmet. I took the idea of circular highlights on the helmet a bit further with this Mandalorian. And for the red armour you can see here, I used a free mix of red leather, deep red and flat black, highlighted up with white sands. You can see I've used a grayscale for the helmet, but I'm once again glazing on a little colour, in this case Vallejo's blue-green, to add some interest. And for the green armour of my last Mandalorian, I started with a dark mix of flat black, black forest and Ardennes green, highlighted up to pure Ardennes green, and then for the brightest highlights I added some Tenere Yellow and some white sands. And I'm now finishing off this colourful group with some basing as described earlier. This completes Clan Wren. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. Do please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and as always you'll find a full product list in the video description below. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Star Wars Legion. Happy painting!